is Richard Dawkins. Nice to see you, man. How are you today? You know, before we start, and I think this is something that you don't hear a lot about, and just to be clear for people, the book is called The God Delusion, but it isn't just about the Judeo-Christian God. I think, and you go to links in the beginning of this book to talk about how it's the term that encompasses anything. So whichever version of a God or deity you believe in, monotheistic or polytheistic, whatever, you're talking about all of them, right? Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. So, right off the bat, what's wrong with, in your opinion, with believing in a God, regardless of who the God is?
I think it's false. I think that it's a matter of belief without evidence, and as a scientist and as an educator, I like the idea that we believe things because there's evidence. There's such a lot of evidence available now at the beginning of the 21st century that it's a real shame, it's a tragedy to base your life upon something for which there is no evidence and never was any evidence, when the real truth is so wonderful.
Well, I suspect that the argument they would make is that because it's absurd, that's why it's faith, right? That if it was evidentiary, you would require no faith and it would be fact, and that would be missing the point of religion.
That's absolutely right, but that's not a point in its favor, is it?
Well, you know, it's whatever gets you through the night, isn't it, ultimately?
Well, no, I mean, for me, what matters is the truth.
The scientific truth.
What other truth is there when we're talking about the universe, when we're talking about the nature of life? Of course, there are other sorts of truths like moral truths, or maybe they're not truths at all, but they're not scientific. But I think if we're talking about the universe, about what reality is, about what life is, then truth means scientific truth, yes. You
know, this book is ultimately, is this a sort of a culmination of many of your years of work in this subject matter? Is this sort of the kind of your final offering, go, listen, this is my God Delusion book and I want to move on from this?
I wouldn't like to necessarily commit myself to that, but I don't have any immediate plans for another religion book, no.
Why get into this?
Well, as I said, I do think it's a tragedy that when there is so much to know, for which there is such a lot of evidence, I do think it's a tragedy that people are being actively led astray by medieval or pre-medieval superstitions and Bronze Age myths written down more than 2,000 years ago. That is such a loss, and so that's one of the reasons for trying to fight against it.
Where do you think that came from? Because, I mean, you're right, the mysteries of this universe that we can see, the physical mystery, it is beautiful. I mean, and if this was all there was, this would be fine. But this has always been around. So where has it come from, do you think, in your opinion, this need to replace it?
The need for religion, do you mean?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, everybody's always had a need to understand, I suppose, and before science was fully developed, they filled that need to understand with superstition or religion, other things like that. There's also a need for consolation, and religion probably gives consolation, or that's a bit of a mixed blessing. The fact that something's consoling, by the way, doesn't make it true, but nevertheless it probably is a human need. So it's easy enough to think of reasons why religion has persisted.
I mean, there's points in your book where you talk about the negative aspects of religion, what it's done to the world. And I saw you on Bill O'Reilly, and it was funny watching you and O'Reilly go back and forth. Who had the worst leaders, Christians or atheists?
Yes.
And it seemed to me that was almost missing the point.
I think that is missing the point. I think, I mean, there have been some simply appalling people in the world, from Henry VIII and Genghis Khan to Hitler and Stalin, and some of them have been religious and some of them have not. I don't think we should, I think you're right, is missing the point to sort of tot up the number of wicked people who've been religious and the number who haven't. The question is, does religious faith, blind faith in the absence of evidence, does that predispose you to do evil things which you wouldn't otherwise do?
Does blind faith, is it a negative? Does it have to be a negative thing?
It might incidentally happen to be positive, but the fact that it's blind means that you have no particular reason to think it's positive, and therefore I think that in general the idea of blind faith, the very idea of blindness, is negative.
Well, maybe that's the wrong word, blind faith. Maybe it's just faith.
Yes, I mean, I use the word blind because it is in the absence of evidence. If it was in the presence of evidence, then you wouldn't call it faith. You wouldn't need faith if it was something. I think you made that point yourself.
Well, I guess when I was going through your book and reading it, you kind of, and again, I've grown up at home, I've seen a lot of Christian people in my life, and you look at, and none of them are running the world, right? None of them are leading crusades, but it provides meaning in their life, and I just thought, hey, you know what, whatever.
Well, that's a very nice sort of laid-back point of view.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah. And in a way, that's right. If people say, well, if it's right for you, if it's true for you, then it's true for you. I think there's something more absolute about truth than that, and I care about truth. I don't mean I wish to impose it. I mean, if people really don't want to learn about what's really true, then far be it from me to force it on them. But I want to give them the opportunity. I don't want children to be brought up sheltered from the truth by a wall of separation from the truth, which is deliberately erected by tradition, by authority in their particular culture.
Is there a misunderstanding, or moreover, has there been miscommunication about the number of atheists that perhaps exist? You always hear about it's Christian nations, and I know fewer and fewer Christians.
I agree with you. I think that it is a bit of a misconception. Certainly, I mean, in Britain, there are, even the polls show that there are a lot